Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The wind was sharp over the King's Road that autumn, whispering through the golden trees like ghosts of 1,000 fallen leaves. South rode Sir Brandon Stark, heir to Winterfell, his cloak of gray fur snapping behind him. He was 20 years of age then, proud and quick of temper, his laughter loud and his sword hand sure. His father, Lord Rickard, had sent him from the north to the Rock on a mission of peace, and perhaps of union. House Stark and House Lannister had not stood together in living memory. The wolves of the north trusted little in lions, whose claws reached deep into southern gold and power. Yet the realm was uneasy in those years, and Rickard Stark was wise enough to see the value of new allies. So he had written to Lord Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West, offering talks of a marriage bond, and Tywin, with all his pride and polished courtesy, had agreed. Brandon had never been farther south than River Run before, but he knew of Tywin's stern honor and colder heart. He had heard the tales of the Lion of Lannister, the man who crushed the Rains and the Tarbecks, leaving their halls smoking in ruin. Still, Brandon was not easily cowed. He laughed as he rode, the northern air thinning into the warmer winds of the south, and said to his men, "If the lion has claws, he will find the wolf's teeth are sharper." After 12 days' ride, they came in sight of Casterly Rock, a mountain carved into the shape of a fortress, rising sheer from the western sea. Its towers gleamed gold beneath the afternoon sun, and its banners rippled red and crimson. Brandon had seen great castles before, the Eyrie, River Run, the ancient walls of Moat Cailin, but never one that seemed to glow with its own light. At the gates, they were met by Sir Kevan Lannister, Tywin's loyal brother. He greeted Brandon with the courtesy due a noble guest, though his eyes were cautious. "My lord awaits you in the Hall of Heroes," Kevan said. "He bids you welcome to the Rock, though he regrets that matters of governance have delayed him until sundown." Brandon bowed his head slightly. "Then I shall see the Rock before I see its lord," he said. Kevan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Few who come here forget either. Inside, the Rock was like nothing he had known. Halls carved from glittering stone, torches set in golden sconces, floors polished smooth as still water. The scent of oil and incense filled the air. The servants moved quietly, their faces bent low. To Brandon, it felt less like a home and more like a shrine, not to gods, but to wealth. He met the Lady Joanna's absence long before her name was spoken. The servants whispered of her still, and of the shadow her death had left behind. Tywin's children, they said, had grown fair and fierce beneath that shadow. The Golden Twins, Jaime and Cersei, and the youngest, a little monster born with mismatched eyes and a twisted body. That evening, when Tywin Lannister finally appeared, he was every bit the legend Brandon had imagined. His hair shone pale gold, his face stern as a statue, his green eyes cool and appraising. He received Brandon in a chamber lined with swords, trophies of past wars, their blades catching the candlelight. "Lord Stark honors me," Tywin said, his voice deep and even. "It is no small thing for the wolf to come so far south." "The wolf seeks no quarrel," Brandon replied. "My father believes peace between our houses would strengthen the realm. He suggests a marriage, one of your blood, one of ours." Tywin's eyes did not flicker. "A sensible thought," he said. And yet, such matters require careful judgment. House Lannister does not give lightly. Brandon smiled. Nor does House Stark ask often. For a long while they spoke in circles, words measured and heavy with meaning. Tywin asked of the North, its mines, its soldiers, its loyalty to the crown. Brandon answered as best he could, though he saw the older man's mind working behind those calm eyes. When the talk was done, Tywin inclined his head. "You will stay as my guest, Sir Brandon. Tomorrow you shall meet my daughter. She is strong-willed. I trust you will not mistake pride for insolence." That night, sleep would not come easily. The waves crashed endlessly against the cliff below, and the moonlight poured through the narrow window like cold silver. Brandon sat awake, wondering what sort of woman Cersei Lannister might be, and what sort of peace his father truly sought. At dawn, when he walked through the gardens above the sea, he found her waiting. She stood beside a pool of clear water, her reflection shimmering like molten gold. Her gown was the color of wine, her hair shining brighter than the sun. When she turned to him, her smile was soft, but her eyes were sharp, appraising him as if weighing his worth. "So you are the wolf," she said. "My father speaks of you as though you were carved from ice." Brandon bowed low, his grin bold. "And you are the lion's daughter. I had thought lions hunted wolves, not courted them." She laughed, a low sound like music, though there was something dangerous beneath it. Perhaps this lioness prefers to choose her prey. And so began the game, a dangerous dance of words and glances between wolf and lion, one that would lead both to peril before it was done. For in that first meeting, neither knew how deep Tywin's schemes ran, nor how costly defiance would be. Morning came pale and gold across the sea, washing the walls of Casterly rock in light. From the highest tower, the banners stirred in the wind, crimson and gold, lions rampant upon the field. Beneath them, the fortress stirred to life, servants hurrying through gleaming corridors, guards changing watch upon the gates of bronze, and amidst it all, Sir Brandon Stark felt as though he had stepped into another world entirely. One carved not by men of earth and snow, but by the hands of kings. Cersei met him again that day in the feasting hall, though she came not as a dutiful daughter, but as a queen in her own right. Her presence filled the chamber long before she spoke. Tywin sat beside her upon his high seat, cold and commanding, while his son Jaime stood not far away, a mirror of her beauty and pride. They might have been two halves of a single blade. The girl's smile and the boy's sword hand gleamed alike in the torchlight. Brandon took his place among the guests, a dozen minor lords and knights whose laughter filled the hall like thunder. Goblets clinked, dogs barked underfoot, and golden wine ran as freely as water. The Northman, in his furs and leather, drew many curious eyes. His manners were rougher than the courtiers, but his words carried a strength that silenced mockery. "Tell me, sir," Cersei said as the meal began, "is it true the northern girls dance barefoot in the snow?" Brandon's grin flashed. "Only when they wish to show courage before a suitor." "And what do the suitors do?" "They join them if they have any worth." Laughter rippled down the table, but Cersei's smile only deepened. Beneath the tablecloth, her fingers drummed lightly against her cup. Jaime watched the exchange, his jaw tightening. Tywin spoke little, though his eyes missed nothing. When the hall grew loud again, he turned to Brandon. "You ride soon to King's Landing, I hear. My daughter might travel with you, if you have no objection. There are matters for the crown to attend." Brandon inclined his head. "No objection, my lord." It was a simple exchange, yet it carried the weight of a trap. Tywin's true intent was hidden behind courtesy, as all his schemes were. For in that same week, letters had already gone forth to the Red Keep, where Tywin sought to wed Cersei to Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. The Starks were but a mask, a pleasant distraction, useful until the prince's consent was gained. Cersei knew nothing of this, or if she did, she cared little. Her heart burned with pride, not patience. That night, when Brandon walked alone along the cliffside gardens, she came to him again, her cloak drawn close about her shoulders. The air was rich with the scent of salt and roses. "You do not belong here," she said softly. He looked to her, amused. "And yet here I stand." "You're too honest," she said, stepping closer. "Too open. My father measures worth in silence and obedience. Men who bow, not men who burn." Brandon's laughter was low. "In Winterfell we bow to no one but the gods." Her eyes caught his then, green, bright as emerald glass. "Then we are both prisoners," she whispered. "You of duty, I of blood." He should have turned away. A wiser man would have. But Brandon Stark was not a man of quiet wisdom. He was a man of heat and heart, bold to a fault. He touched her cheek lightly, and for a heartbeat, she did not move. The sea crashed far below, and the wind tore through the garden with a sigh like a warning. "Come away from here," she said suddenly. "Ride with me, north or east, anywhere beyond my father's reach. I could be yours, and no lion's daughter at all." The word struck him like a blade. He saw the fire in her, not love, but hunger, the same restless defiance that lived in his own heart. Yet behind her beauty lay danger, a shadow cast long by Tywin's wrath. "Would you have me steal you?" he asked. "Would you not dare?" The question lingered, trembling between them. Then, before he could answer, the sound of boots echoed down the corridor. Jaime appeared, his hand on his sword, his gaze like ice. "Sister," he said sharply, "father calls for you." Cersei turned, her mask of calm slipping neatly back into place. "Then he shall find me where I wish to be." "Not tonight." Jaime's voice carried no warmth. The tension between them was like drawn steel, something sharp, invisible, and deadly. Brandon said nothing, though he met the younger man's stare with the ease of one who feared no challenge. At last, Cersei drew her cloak tighter and turned to go. "Good night, Sir Brandon," she said, her tone sweet and distant. "Dream of snow. It will be long before you see it again." When she was gone, Jaime lingered. His words were low and measured. "You are far from home, Stark. Take care you do not mistake a lioness for a maiden." Brandon's smile returned, fierce as ever. "I have hunted worse in the north." The Lannister's hand twitched on his hilt, but he said no more. With a curt nod, he turned and left. That night, the dreams came, of fire and ice, of blood upon stone, of a red-haired girl crying his name from a place far colder than this. Brandon woke before dawn, heart pounding, and for the first time he felt unease settle in his bones. By morning, whispers spread through the rock. The Stark heir had walked with the lion's daughter beneath the moon. Tywin said nothing, though his silence carried the weight of judgment. When they met again in the Hall of Heroes, the Lord of Casterly Rock spoke with the calm of a man whose plans were already set in motion. "Your father will have my reply within the fortnight," he said. "But I must be clear. The future of my house is bound elsewhere. The crown has its own designs." Brandon frowned. "Then why bring me here at all?" Tywin's gaze hardened. "To learn what sort of men lead the North. Now I know." The insult was as deliberate as it was cruel. Brandon rose, his hand tightening on the pommel of his sword. For a moment, it seemed the hall itself held its breath. Then he bowed stiffly and turned to go. Outside, the wind howled through the golden banners, and the sea below roared like a beast in chains. In the courtyard, Cersei watched him mount his horse. Their eyes met one last time. She did not speak, but her expression was something between fury and sorrow. He rode from Casterly Rock that day, the sun blazing behind him, the taste of salt and gold still bitter on his tongue. And though he could not yet know it, his defiance would echo far beyond those cliffs, for Tywin Lannister never forgot an insult, nor forgave a slight. From that day forth, the Lion swore that no blood of his would ever mingle with the blood of the North. The road from Casterly Rock wound eastward through rolling hills and fields of gold, and for 3 days, Sir Brandon Stark rode without rest. He did not look back, though the sea wind followed him like a whisper of old grudges. Behind him lay the rock, the proud house of lions, its gates closing with the finality of a coffin lid. Before him stretched the heart of the realm, villages that smelled of wheat and smoke, rivers silver under the sun, and the long, winding road that would bear him toward Riverrun and, in time, home. His men rode silent. They had seen his temper before and knew when not to speak. Yet in Brandon's chest, anger burned cold as the northern snows. He had been made a fool, baited and dismissed by Tywin Lannister's pride. His father's hopes for peace lay in tatters. And worse still, though he would not confess it, not even to himself, a part of him grieved for the golden woman he had left behind. At night, when the campfires flickered low, he saw her in memory, her eyes green as glass, her voice promising escape. But there had been no escape, only deceit, coiled in the heart of every Lannister scheme. On the 4th night, as they made camp beneath a stand of oaks, a rider came from the west, his horse lathered and his cloak torn by the wind. The man bore the sigil of House Tully and carried a sealed letter for Brandon Stark. He broke the wax beneath the firelight. The words were few, but they struck him hard as any blade. Lord Rickard bids you to return north with all haste. Matters of the realm turn ill. The crown grows restless, and whispers reach Winterfell that the south stirs toward war. Brandon's jaw tightened. The crown, he murmured. Always the crown. He rode on at dawn, leaving 2 men behind to guard the slower wagons. His company pressed north at a brutal pace, through rain and fog and the endless gray of the riverlands. By the time the towers of Riverrun came into view, his horses were near spent, their breath steaming in the chill morning air. Lord Hoster Tully received him in the great hall, his ruddy face drawn with care. "You bring a storm with you, Stark," he said. "Word travels fast. Tywin's pride festers, and the king grows weary of his counsel. Worse still, Prince Rhaegar has refused the match Tywin sought for his daughter." Brandon's eyes narrowed. "Cersei." "Aye," Hoster said. "Tywin's wrath will not cool easily. He spoke before the court of northern arrogance, of wolves who think themselves equal to lions. The king laughed, but there was venom in it. You've made enemies, lad, powerful ones. I did not come to beg his favor." "Perhaps you should have," Hoster muttered, "for I've seen what happens when pride rides before sense." That night, Riverrun's halls were filled with uneasy talk, whispers of the crown prince's strange disappearances, of southern lords stirring with ambition, of a realm held together only by silence and fear. Brandon listened, but his mind drifted always back to the rock. He wondered if Cersei wept or if she smiled at his ruin. In truth, Cersei Lannister did neither. For even as Brandon rode north, she stood before her father's seat in the great hall of Casterly Rock, her face pale with fury. "You promised me to a prince," she cried. "You swore Rhaegar would be mine." Tywin's gaze was colder than the stones about them. "I promised you nothing that was not deserved. The prince has chosen another. Your beauty will find no crown now." Her hands clenched. "Then I'll take one for myself." Tywin rose, tall and terrible. "You will do nothing without my word. You are a Lannister of the Rock, not some wildling maid to chase fancy in the woods." For a moment, she looked as though she might strike him. Then she turned away, her voice trembling but defiant. "I will not be your pawn forever, father. The North may spurn me, the crown may mock me, but I am still my mother's daughter. And you, for all your gold and glory, cannot keep the lions caged forever." She left the hall in silence, her gown trailing like spilled wine. That night, Jaime came to her chamber. He found her pacing by the window, the sea wind in her hair. "Father means to marry you to some lord of the Reach," he said. "A Florent or a Rowan. He thinks it will heal his wounded pride." She turned sharply. "And what of my pride? Must I be given away like a coin to mend his honor?" Jaime stepped closer. "We are his children, Cersei. That is all we have ever been." For a heartbeat, the mask slipped from her face. She looked young then, and terribly alone. "There was one who might have taken me for more," she said softly. "The wolf." "Aye." Her eyes drifted to the dark beyond the window. "He would have fought the world for me." "And died for it," Jaime said. "Do you love him still?" She gave a bitter laugh. "Love? No, but I envy him. He could defy my father and live to tell it." Yet even that, she would soon learn, was not true. Far to the east, in King's Landing, the realm's tempers flared hotter than ever. The Mad King, Aerys II, sat upon the Iron Throne, his fingers bleeding from the blades. He raged at shadows, seeing treason in every whisper. When word of Tywin's slight reached his ears, that the Lion of Lannister had sought to wed his daughter to Rhaegar, his fury burned bright. "He would make himself father to a king," Aerys shouted before the court. "Let him choke on his gold." Thus began a chain of pride and vengeance that would, in time, draw the Starks, the Lannisters, and the Targaryens into a single storm. But for now, Brandon knew nothing of that. He rode northward through the misty woods toward Winterfell and the father who awaited him. When he reached the gates, the snows had begun to fall, light as feathers, cold as judgment. Lord Rickard met him in the courtyard, his gray hair blowing in the wind. "You have ridden far," Rickard said. "And what have you gained?" "Only this, father, that lions do not trade friendship, only favors." Rickard nodded slowly. "Then remember that well, for a favor bought in gold may yet be paid in blood." Brandon bowed his head. The words would haunt him in the years to come. Above them, the direwolf banners stirred in the wind, and the first true chill of winter settled over the land. Far away, in the golden halls of the Rock, Tywin Lannister sat alone, a goblet of wine untouched before him. "So be it," he murmured. "The North will have no part of my blood." And from that vow, born of pride and of a single meeting between wolf and lion, would come the long hatred that would stain the Seven Kingdoms for generations. Winterfell had not changed, yet to Brandon Stark's eyes, it seemed smaller than he remembered. The walls were gray and strong, the great hall filled with the scent of smoke and pine. The voices of the North echoed as they always had, steady, loyal, unbroken. Yet he felt no peace here. The air was colder, and the shadow of the south followed him like a wound that would not heal. His father received him in the solar beside the hearth, the fire casting long lines across the maps and scrolls spread before him. Lord Rickard Stark was a tall man still, though age had carved lines around his mouth and eyes. His hair, once dark, had gone the color of frost. "You have seen the lions," Rickard said. "Tell me what you saw." Brandon stood before the fire, gold and silence, a house ruled by one man's pride. Tywin Lannister is a king in all but name. Rickard's gaze was steady. And his daughter? Brandon hesitated. The memory of her came swift, her laughter, her defiance, the glint of her eyes like sunlight on a blade. "Beautiful," he said at last, "and dangerous. She hates her father more than she loves her house." Rickard leaned back in his chair. Then she is her father's daughter after all. For a long while, they spoke of what was to come, of the uneasy peace that bound the realm, of the South's simmering unrest. News from King's Landing was troubling. The king's temper grew worse by the month, and the whispers of his madness spread from court to countryside. Rickard Stark had always been a cautious man, yet even he could sense the storm rising. "The realm trembles," he said quietly, "and when it breaks, it will not spare the proud. Tywin hides behind gold, Eris behind fire. It will fall to those with honor to hold the realm together." Brandon smiled wryly. "Then let us pray honor is enough." But even as he spoke, the raven came, a black shape against the pale sky. The maester broke the seal and read aloud, his voice low with unease. "To Lord Rickard Stark of Winterfell, the crown summons you and your son Brandon to King's Landing. The Prince Rhaegar Targaryen has taken Lady Lyanna Stark from her betrothal to Robert Baratheon. The king demands explanation and obedience." The words hung in the air like frost. Brandon rose to his feet at once. "He took her, by force?" "So it is written," the maester said. Rickard's hand closed into a fist. Rhaegar would not dare. There must be some mistake. But Brandon knew better. His sister's laughter, wild and fierce, echoed in his memory. Lyanna had always spoken of Rhaegar with a strange light in her eyes, of songs and prophecies, of honor and destiny. And now destiny had stolen her away. He turned toward the door. "I ride for King's Landing, tonight." Rickard's voice stopped him. "You will not go alone." But Brandon only shook his head. "I will not wait while she suffers. If the prince has wronged her, I will see him answer for it." The next morning, he rode south with 24 men, the best of Winterfell's riders. Their banners streamed gray against the morning sky. The wind was sharp, the snows falling light upon the road. Brandon's anger burned so fiercely it seemed no frost could touch him. For 7 days they rode, swift as vengeance. When they reached the city gates, the smell of rot and smoke filled the air. King's Landing, sprawling, restless, and cruel. The Red Keep loomed above the city like a crown of rusted iron. Brandon did not seek counsel or ceremony. He rode straight through the gates of the keep, his men close behind, and demanded audience with the king. "I am Brandon Stark of Winterfell," he shouted. "Bring me Prince Rhaegar! Bring me my sister!" The courtyard fell silent. The gold cloaks shifted uneasily. None moved to stop him, for his fury was like a living thing. But within the keep, the king heard, and laughter echoed from the throne room, sharp and mad. Eris Targaryen sat upon his iron throne, his hair unkempt, his nails black with dried blood. His eyes burned bright with fevered delight. "The wolf howls at my gate," he said, his voice thin and cruel. "Let him enter." When Brandon was brought before him, He did not kneel. "Where is my sister?" he demanded. "Where is Lyanna?" The king leaned forward, smiling that terrible smile. "She is with the prince," he said. "And the prince is with destiny. Would you steal her from prophecy, boy?" "Prophecy be damned," Brandon spat. "You have stolen my blood. Release her, or I'll take her back myself." The court gasped. Even the king's guard stirred uneasily. But Aerys only laughed, a sound like steel scraping bone. "You would take her by force? You would draw steel against your king?" Brandon's hand went to his sword, though he did not draw it. "I would take her from the man who shamed her, even if that man sits a throne." Aerys's eyes widened in glee. "Madness speaks through you, Wolf. Perhaps it is catching." He turned to his guards. "Take him. Take them all." The Starks were seized before they could resist. Chains were thrown about their necks, and they were dragged screaming into the dungeons. Brandon fought like a beast, but the weight of numbers bore him down. From his cell, he heard the city's noise fade to silence. Then the screams began. One by one, his men were tortured, their names lost beneath the sound of fire and laughter. When at last word reached Winterfell, Rickard Stark rode south himself, demanding his son's release and his daughter's return. But Aerys's madness had ripened into cruelty. He summoned the lords to witness what he called justice. Rickard was bound in chains and suspended above the great hall. Beneath him, Aerys ordered a fire to be lit. Brandon was brought forth in turn, a strangling device about his neck, the cord tied to his father's arms. "Save your father," the king said. "Reach him." Brandon pulled until his skin tore and his eyes burst, while his father burned above him. Neither survived. When the flames died, the hall was silent. Aerys smiled, his teeth red as blood. "So ends the House of Wolves," he said. But the fire he lit that day would not die. It would spread from castle to castle, from lord to lord, until all the 7 kingdoms burned in rebellion. And somewhere, far to the west, in her father's gilded hall, Cersei Lannister listened to the tale and said nothing. Only later, when the chamber was empty and the candles guttered low, did she whisper to the dark, "If the wolf had lived, I might have been free." Outside, the wind howled over the sea, carrying her words away, and the lions of the rock slept uneasily, dreaming of wolves. The tale of Rickard and Brandon Stark's deaths swept through the 7 kingdoms like a cold wind. Word of it reached Winterfell beneath a gray sky heavy with snow, carried by a rider whose horse stumbled from exhaustion before the gate. The courtyard fell silent as his words spread. Lord Rickard burned alive, Brandon strangled in his chains, the king's laughter echoing over their ashes. For a moment, none moved. Then the cry went up from the walls, wild and terrible. "The Starks are slain!" Lyanna's younger brothers stood in the great hall, pale with disbelief. Eddard, fostered for years at the Eyrie, had only just returned home with Robert Baratheon at his side, the wind from the Vale still clinging to their cloaks. Neither spoke as the Maester's trembling voice recited the king's words. Eddard's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword. "My father, my brother." Robert's eyes burned with fury. "The mad king has doomed himself. He touched your kin, and mine betrothed. He has brought doom on us all." In that moment, the rebellion was born. The banners of the North were raised that night, the gray direwolf snapping against the storm. Ravens flew from Winterfell to Storm's End, to the Eyrie, to the Riverlands, to every corner where loyalty or hatred for Aerys might still burn. "Call it what you will," said Lord Jon Arryn when word reached him, "but the realm will call it treason." Robert laughed, though there was no mirth in it. Then let it be treason. I will wear the name proudly, so long as the crown burns for what it's done. Thus began the Great War that would later be called Robert's Rebellion, though in truth, it had been born of Stark blood and Targaryen fire long before Robert raised his hammer. In the west, the Lions of Casterly Rock watched the storm rise but did not yet stir. Tywin Lannister, ever cold and cautious, withdrew from the royal court soon after Aerys's madness took its final turn. He claimed the king had grown unfit to rule, yet he sent no banners north nor south. His armies remained within the rock, sharpening their blades in silence. "Why does he wait?" asked Sir Kevan Lannister, pacing before the war map in the council chamber. Tywin's gaze was fixed upon the candles. "Because patience is worth more than gold. Let the wolves and stags bloody themselves first. When the realm lies broken, it will be the lions who feast." But his daughter Cersei's heart burned with a different fire. She had not forgotten the look in Brandon Stark's eyes, nor the words he had spoken before he left her father's hall. In secret, she had followed the tidings of war, every rumor, every battle, every death. When she learned that Brandon's body had been returned to the north, little more than ashes and bone, she locked herself in her chamber and did not weep. She sat at her mirror until dawn, her reflection pale and cold as marble. "So ends the wolf," she whispered, "but not his vengeance." Days later, Jaime returned from King's Landing, newly sworn to the Kingsguard. His armor shone white, his sword newly forged, but there was no pride in his face. Cersei confronted him in the corridor beneath their father's hall. "You left me for that madman," she hissed. "You serve a king who burned our guests alive." Jaime's jaw tightened. "I serve as I am commanded." "Then you are a coward." His eyes flashed. "You think I do not see what he is? Every day I watch him whisper to his shadows, smell the smoke of men he's burned. But Father commanded me to stay close to the throne, to watch, to wait." Cersei turned from him. "While others fight for honor and vengeance, the lions sit in silence. What does Father plan to win? The ashes of a ruined realm." Jaime did not answer. That night, she went to her father's solar. Tywin sat alone, as he always did, a map of the 7 kingdoms before him. "Father," she said, "the north calls for justice. The stormlands march, the riverlands rise. You could end this war or rule it, yet you do nothing." Tywin looked up, calm as ever. "You think me idle, girl? Every battle weakens the realm. Every lord who dies leaves another vassal desperate for protection. And who better to offer it than a Lannister?" "Protection," she repeated bitterly. "You mean conquest." He gave a faint smile. "Call it what you wish. The realm will call it peace." Cersei's anger flared. "And if Robert Baratheon wins? If he takes the throne?" Tywin leaned back. "Then the realm will need a queen to steady him." The words struck her silent. He met her gaze, unflinching. "You are beautiful, clever, and strong. If Baratheon triumphs, he will need you more than any crown. And you, my daughter, will have what you once sought, a throne." Cersei turned away, her thoughts racing. A throne, power, freedom, and chains of another kind. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she saw Brandon's face again, heard his voice echo through the wind. "Would you have me steal you? Would you not dare?" She had dared nothing, and now the realm was on fire. Meanwhile, the war spread. Battles flared across the Trident, and the songs of swords filled the air. Robert's hammer crushed the loyalists at Summerhall. Eddard's banners swept down from the neck, silent and swift as winter itself. When Rhaegar Targaryen finally emerged from hiding, His silver armor gleamed with rubies, and the rebels met him upon the banks of the Trident. There, amidst mud and blood, Robert struck him down with a single blow that shattered the prince's breastplate and scattered his rubies across the river like droplets of blood. From that day, the Targaryen line began to die. King's Landing trembled. Tywin Lannister, seeing the crown weakened and the outcome certain, finally moved his hosts eastward. "The lions come to the gates," said the small folk. "The rock rides for the king." Aerys, in his madness, welcomed them. The gates were opened in his name. But when the Lannisters entered, they came not as allies, but conquerors. The Red Keep ran red with blood. Tywin's men slew guards and servants alike, all in the name of loyalty. In the throne room, Jaime Lannister stood before the Iron Throne, his sword slick with blood. The Mad King lay dead at his feet, his eyes wide in terror. When the doors burst open, Robert's men found the young knight seated upon the steps of the throne, his golden hair bright against the dark iron blades. They called him Kingslayer, though few understood that he had slain not for glory, but for mercy. And when Robert Baratheon finally took the throne, Tywin Lannister stood at his side, smiling that same cold smile. Cersei was brought before the new king not as prisoner, but as prize. She bowed low, her gown gleaming like molten gold. Robert looked upon her beauty, and though his heart still mourned Lyanna Stark, he took Cersei to wife soon after his coronation. Thus the wolf's loss became the lion's gain. But deep within her heart, Cersei knew the truth of it. Her father had won the realm, yet she had lost her soul. On the night before her wedding, she stood alone upon a balcony, the sea wind whispering through her hair. Below, the waves struck the cliffs like distant drums. "If the wolf had lived," she murmured, "perhaps the lioness would have learned to love." But only the wind answered, cold and without mercy. And so the Starks and Lannisters, bound once by a chance of peace, were forever parted by pride, by blood, and by the echo of a love that never was. The years that followed were years of uneasy peace. The war was done, the dragons slain, and Robert Baratheon wore the crown of Westeros. Yet the peace that settled upon the realm was thin as glass, and beneath it old hatreds festered, slow, silent, and poisonous. In the north, Eddard Stark ruled Winterfell as his father had before him, with honor, restraint, and the quiet strength of stone. The snows fell thicker now, the days grew shorter, and the young wolves of House Stark were born into a world that did not yet know the shadow waiting in its heart. In the south, the Lannisters prospered. Casterly Rock gleamed brighter than ever, its gold mines overflowing, its banners untattered. King Robert had taken Cersei to wife, and though she wore her crown with grace, her heart remained colder than the steel that forged it. She had given him heirs, a blonde boy and girl, fair as summer wheat. The realm called them royal. She called them Lannisters. Robert loved her not. His heart, as everyone whispered, was buried with Lyanna Stark, the woman he could not forget. At feasts, he would drink until his eyes shone wet and far away, speaking of the one he lost. Each word was a cut that Cersei endured in silence. Her smile before the court was flawless, her courtesy sharp as any dagger. Yet behind the mask, her bitterness deepened with every passing moon. It was said that when the king rode to war or to the hunt, the queen lingered by the sea-facing windows of the Red Keep, staring westward. There, the sun would sink in red fire, painting the horizon in the colors of her house. None dared ask what she thought in those moments, but if one had stood near enough to hear, they might have caught her whisper, a voice so soft it could have been the wind itself. "You burned my wolf, father, and in his ashes, you forged my crown." She had become what her father desired, a queen. Yet she knew with every breath that she had been used as a weapon, her pride turned to chains of gold. Tywin Lannister's triumph was near absolute, his daughter upon the throne, his house enriched, his enemies broken. He ruled the realm's coin and council alike, while Robert wasted his strength on wine, women, and memories. But even Tywin could not command the hearts of men. Jaime Lannister, still the Kingslayer, wore white armor that no oath could cleanse. The stain of his deed followed him wherever he walked. To Cersei, he was the only soul left in the world who saw her not as queen, but as herself. To the realm, he was a warning. Beauty and ruin bound together in one bright sword. They met in shadows now, in the quiet hours between night and dawn, when the Red Keep slept. Their words were few, their hearts bound by secrets older than thrones. "I would burn the world for you," Jaime said once, his voice low. She smiled sadly. "The world will burn soon enough." In the north, Eddard Stark heard nothing of these whispered sins. He ruled with calm, teaching his children honor and duty, the virtues of the wolf. But he too carried ghosts, the memory of Brandon, his wild brother, whose laughter once filled the halls. Sometimes, in the stillness before dawn, Eddard would walk the crypts beneath Winterfell. There, by the stone likenesses of his kin, he would pause before the unmarked space that should have held Brandon's effigy. "He should have lived," he would whisper. "The realm would be kinder for it." But fate, once twisted, does not unwind. As the years rolled onward, the realm forgot how its peace had been purchased, with fire, with treachery, with love betrayed. The songs turned the tale into glory. Robert the usurper, Cersei the golden queen, Eddard the quiet wolf. Only a few remembered the truth, that the war's beginning had been written not in crowns or prophecies, but in one proud heart meeting another beneath the cliffs of the western sea. At Casterly Rock, the memory of that meeting still lingered. Servants whispered that the Lady Joanna's garden, where the first words between Cersei and Brandon had been spoken, was never touched by new growth. The roses that once bloomed there had withered after the rebellion and never returned. The gardeners tried, year after year, to replant them, but the soil remained barren. Cersei would not allow the garden to be torn down. She forbade her servants to touch the stones, though she herself never went there. "Leave it," she commanded. "Let it sleep." And so it did. A place where love had flickered briefly before being smothered by pride and fire. Yet stories have long memories. Years later, when the queen's first son was crowned prince of the realm, a bard came to court, a northerner with gray eyes and a voice roughened by frost. His song told not of kings or dragons, but of a wolf who loved a lioness beneath the golden cliffs. The court listened, entranced, until the last verse faded. He rode from the rock with the dawn at his back. The lioness wept in the sea's red track. Gold turned to ashes, pride turned to pain, and the wolf never came to the rock again. When the song ended, silence filled the hall. Then Cersei rose from her throne, her face pale as moonlight. "Enough," she said. "No more of this song. Not in my hall." The bard was dismissed, though the queen sent no punishment. Some said she paid him in secret gold to keep silent. Others swore she wept that night. But the next morning, the bard was gone. His horse was found at dawn on the King's Road, riderless, his saddle dark with blood, and when the sun rose over the Red Keep, a single raven flew north, carrying no letter. Only a strip of cloth, gray as winter, tied to its leg. The masters could not say what it meant, nor where it came from. But those who remembered whispered that it was a sign that the past never dies, and that even in peace, the wolves and lions were doomed never to share the same den. In Winterfell, the winds howled across the battlements, and the direwolves beneath the godswood raised their heads as if answering a distant call. The world was quiet again, for a time, yet in that stillness lay the promise of storm. For though the Starks and Lannisters had never joined in love, their fates were forever bound by blood, by pride, and by the ghosts of all they had lost. The realm prospered in name only. Years passed, and the Seven Kingdoms, though crowned in peace, were restless beneath their banners. Gold poured from the mines of the rock and the coffers of the crown, but loyalty could not be bought, nor trust reforged once broken. The fires of rebellion had cooled, but their embers smoldered unseen beneath the ash. In the north, the Starks endured. The snows deepened each winter, and though the cold crept into the bones of the land, Winterfell remained steadfast, its great heart beating with quiet strength. Lord Eddard Stark ruled with honor, his hall filled with the laughter of children, Robb, Sansa, Arya, Bran, and Rickon, and the promise of another age. He rarely spoke of the past, yet sometimes, when the hearth burned low and the wind howled through the godswood, he would look into the flames and see faces, his father, his brother, the sister he had buried in the south. Their ghosts lingered in the silence of the keep, as if waiting for something yet undone. Far to the south, in the Red Keep, Queen Cersei wore her crown of gold and jewels, but it sat heavy upon her head. Robert's court was a place of noise and wine, of feasts that lasted through the night and debts that grew with every dawn. The king's laughter filled the halls, loud and careless, yet when he looked upon his queen, his eyes were empty. Cersei had come to understand her marriage for what it was, a trade of one kind of cage for another. Her father had given her to a king to strengthen the house, but the throne she had gained offered no power, only humiliation. Robert drank and rutted with whores, and she endured, her pride the only armor left to her. When her first son, Joffrey, was old enough to stand beside her on the dais, she watched the court bend knee before him. He was handsome, golden-haired and imperious, and in him she saw the reflection of her own ambition. "A lion," she whispered once, brushing his hair from his brow. "You will make them fear you, as they once feared your grandsire." But fear, as Cersei well knew, was a fire that burned both ways. One night, as the moonlight spilled across her chambers, she summoned Jaime to her side. He came in silence, his armor gleaming white in the dark. "Do you ever think of him?" she asked. "Who?" "The wolf." Jaime frowned. "After all these years? Why?" "Because he was the first to defy father, the only one who ever dared." Her voice was low, distant. "He rode into our hall like a storm. He saw me, truly saw me, not as a prize, not as a daughter to be bartered. He wanted me for what I was." "And you would have run with him?" She smiled, faint and sad. "Perhaps, had he asked a second time." Jaime said nothing. He knew her words were not born of love, but of bitterness. The ghost of Brandon Stark haunted her, not because of what had been, but because of what might have been. When he left her chamber, she stood long by the window, staring westward toward the sea. The wind from Casterly Rock carried faintly even here, or so she imagined, that sharp, salt tang of home. Yet there was no comfort in it. Elsewhere in the realm, Tywin Lannister's influence grew ever stronger. As Hand of the King once more, he commanded the realm's coin and council. He governed through fear and order, as he always had, his golden lion banners flying high above the rock. Yet he too carried his ghosts. When he rode alone through the great halls of Casterly Rock, his eyes sometimes drifted to the corridor that led to Joanna's garden, the one that had died the year of the rebellion. No flowers grew there still. The soil had soured, and every attempt to replant had failed. Some whispered that the gods themselves had cursed the ground, for there the blood of love and betrayal had first mingled. Tywin forbade any to speak of it. Still, the servants told tales of strange sounds at night, the rustle of leaves in windless air, the low echo of a woman's laughter, the ghost of a wolf's howl carried up from the sea. Tywin paid the tales no mind. He had little patience for ghosts. "The dead," he said once, "cannot harm the living. Only the living can do that." Yet even he could not banish what lingered between his blood and the North's. When a raven arrived from Winterfell bearing word that Eddard Stark had agreed to foster his eldest son with Lord Arryn in the Vale, Tywin read the letter twice before setting it aside. "A prudent man," he said quietly. "He teaches his heirs to live in honor." Cersei, seated nearby, looked up from her embroidery. "Honor is a poor shield against daggers." He gave her a sharp look. "And pride is no armor against time." Their gazes met, two lions, cold and unyielding. "Would you have had me wed the wolf?" she asked at last. Tywin did not answer for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was almost weary. "The wolf would have broken you." "No," Cersei said softly. "He would have freed me." The silence that followed was heavy as stone. That night, a storm swept the western coast, fierce and sudden. The waves crashed against the rock's cliffs, and thunder rolled like the growl of some ancient beast. Servants lit candles in every hall, and still the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. Cersei stood upon her balcony as the rain lashed her face. For an instant, she thought she saw a shape below, a dark figure standing upon the rocks where the sea met the cliffs, his cloak whipping in the wind. "Brandon?" she whispered, though she knew it could not be. When she blinked, the figure was gone, leaving only the sea's roar and the endless hiss of rain. In the north, the same storm reached Winterfell days later. The Meisters said it was unlike any in memory. The wind howled for 3 nights straight, tearing banners from their poles. In the Godswood, beneath the ancient heart tree, Eddard Stark dreamed of his brother. Brandon stood before him as he had been in life, proud, fearless, his smile bright as summer. "The lions will pay," he said, "but not yet, not by your hand." Eddard woke before dawn, the wind still raging outside. For a moment, he thought he heard the distant echo of a wolf's cry, carried from beyond the walls, wild and mournful. He went to the window and looked out over the white fields. The storm was breaking. The first pale light of morning shone upon the snow, untouched and silent. "Winter is coming," he murmured, as he always did. But in the far south, where the red keep gleamed under the sun, the queen awoke to the same dawn and whispered the same words, though hers carried a different meaning. "Winter is coming," Cersei said softly, her fingers resting upon her son's golden hair. "And when it does, the lion will not yield." Two voices, far apart, speaking the same truth. The years had dulled neither pride nor memory. Though the wolves and lions had never joined in marriage, their fates remained bound, not by peace, but by prophecy, written in blood long spilled, waiting still to be answered. Years turned, and the peace that followed Robert's rebellion thinned like old parchment. The realm, still bright to those who dwelled far from its heart, was rotting quietly beneath its crown. The king drank more than he ruled, the small folk whispered of debts and hunger, and the lords, old and young alike, began again to sharpen their swords. In the north, Winterfell endured as it always had. The gray stones stood unyielding against time and frost, their watchful walls wrapped in the breath of snow. The hearths were warm, the wolves well fed, and yet Lord Eddard Stark often felt a shadow at his back, not of treachery, but of memory. He had seen too much of southern fire to trust the peace that the Iron Throne promised. Sometimes, when the wind blew from the west, he would walk to the battlements and stare toward the sunset, as if he could see past leagues of forest and mountain, past the Reach and the Riverlands, all the way to Casterly Rock. He did not know why he looked that way. Perhaps some instinct whispered that the true peril to the north would not come from beyond the wall, but from the south, from the lions that had once feasted on the flesh of kings. His wife, Lady Catelyn, would find him there on such evenings, his cloak heavy with frost. "You dream again," she would say softly. "Not dream," Ned would answer. "Remember." "Then remember the living, my lord. The dead are beyond our reach." He would nod, though her words gave him little comfort, for he knew that in Westeros the dead were never truly gone. Their deeds clung to the living like smoke to a hearthstone. And far to the south, Queen Cersei remembered as well. The years had changed her little. She was still golden and proud, her beauty untouched by time's slow hand. Yet her eyes had grown colder. Robert's love, if ever it had existed, had long been drowned in wine. The court whispered of his bastards, his hunts, his temper. But it was the queen who ruled the palace now, her will bending the council, and her spies weaving threads unseen. At night, she walked the high balconies of the Red Keep, looking east toward the sea. Sometimes she would whisper to the wind as though it might carry her words to the rock. "Father, you gave me a crown and took my heart. May the gods grant you joy of both." But Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West, heard no prayer. The Lord of Casterly Rock ruled still with iron precision. His hair had turned white, but his gaze remained as sharp as a drawn blade. When he thought of his daughter, he felt both triumph and unease, for though she sat beside a king, she was no longer his to command. And yet, in his heart, Tywin bore one wound that would never heal. It was not the loss of his wife, nor the stain of Jaime's shame, but the knowledge that somewhere in the north, the memory of House Stark endured, unbroken, unforgotten, and beyond his reach. He had once sworn that no lion would ever take a wolf to wife, and in that vow had been pride, not wisdom. For in denying alliance, he had made enemies of the only house that had never sought to deceive him. It was a truth he would never speak, not even to himself. In the Red Keep, the court buzzed with talk of new tensions between the crown and the lords of the realm. Old debts pressed hard upon the treasury, and gold from Casterly Rock no longer flowed as freely as it had once done. Cersei watched the kingdom's edges fray, and in her heart something old stirred again. "Let them fight," she said one evening to Jaime. "Let the realm tear itself apart. When the dust clears, it will be the lions who remain." Jaime looked at her across the candlelight, the reflection of flame dancing in his green eyes. "You sound like father." Her smile was thin. "Perhaps, but he rules through fear. I will rule through fire." "Fire consumes," Jaime said quietly. "Then let it," she whispered. Not far away, in Winterfell, the same fire smoldered in another heart. The Stark children were growing, each bearing the mark of their house in their own way. Robb with his father's quiet strength, Arya with her uncle Brandon's wild defiance, Sansa with her mother's beauty and hope for songs. And in the youngest, Jon, there was something else. The shadow of a secret Eddard Stark had carried from the south, one known only to the gods. When Ned looked upon Jon, he sometimes thought of Brandon again, of his brother's laughter, of his quick temper, of the reckless courage that had burned too bright. Brandon would have laughed at this peace, Ned thought. He would have said that the North sleeps too easily, and he would have been right. For already storms were gathering. Ravens came from King's Landing bearing news that the king and his court would ride north to Winterfell. The announcement brought both joy and unease. Robert wished to see his old friend, to hunt and feast and laugh as in the days before crowns. But he also came with a request, one that would bind Stark and Lannister closer than either desired. When the royal host arrived, banners blazing, the air was thick with dust and trumpets. The king embraced Ned before the gods would, his laughter loud and honest. Yet when Robert's eyes fell upon Cersei, there was no warmth in them, only weary contempt, thinly veiled. That night, as the feast roared and the wine flowed, Cersei's gaze wandered across the hall to where the Starks sat. She studied their faces, the quiet lord, his steadfast lady, the strong young son, the daughters radiant with innocence. And for the first time in many years, she felt something like envy. How strange, she thought, that the wolves should know peace when lions rule the realm. Later, when the king's cups lay empty and the torches burned low, she rose and left the hall alone. The corridors of Winterfell were silent, filled with the scent of snow and smoke. Her footsteps echoed softly upon the stone. In the godswood, the heart tree stood ancient and white, its red leaves whispering secrets to the cold night air. Cersei paused before it, her breath clouding in the chill. "I once dreamed of this place," she murmured. "Long ago, a wolf came to me, bleeding from the heart. I woke before I could learn its name." The wind stirred, carrying faintly the distant howl of a direwolf across the frozen fields. For a heartbeat, the queen's hand trembled. Then she turned away. The next morning, the king made his offer, and with it, the fate of two great houses was bound anew. "Serve as my hand, Ned," Robert said. "Rule beside me, as we once swore we would." And though Eddard Stark hesitated, though every instinct warned him against the South's snares, he bowed his head at last. "As you command, your grace." The court cheered. The queen smiled her false smile, and far above them all, the cold winds of the north stirred the banners of House Stark. No lion and no wolf had ever been joined in marriage, yet the game had begun anew, and its players did not yet see how deep the claws of fate would cut. For when lions and wolves cross paths beneath a crown, the gods themselves look down and do not look away. The king's visit to Winterfell lingered in memory long after the banners of the crown had vanished beyond the southern hills. The snows had come late that year, soft and quiet, as though the old gods wished to hide the road the royal host had taken. But no snow could bury what had been set in motion. Lord Eddard Stark had ridden south as the king's hand, leaving his wife and children behind beneath the cold stones of Winterfell. His duty had called him to the capital, that nest of lies and fire. And though his heart had been heavy, his honor had not allowed refusal. "The realm needs me," he had said, his voice as steady as the wind. Yet Catelyn, watching from the battlements, had seen the doubt in his eyes. When the last hoofbeats faded, the north fell to silence. And in the south, the lioness stirred. Queen Cersei Lannister stood at her window in the Red Keep, the harbor below her glittering like 1,000 shards of glass. Word had reached her before the king's return. Lord Stark had accepted the hand's chain. She had known it would come to this. Robert trusted no one more than his old friend, and perhaps no one else could have given her the danger she longed for. The North had always been a thorn buried deep, a wound her father's pride had never healed. Now the wolf would walk willingly into her den. The small council met the next morning. Lord Baelish's sly smile greeted her across the table, and Lord Varys blinked his soft eyes, his voice smooth as silk. The king, already flushed with drink, announced his new hand before them all. "Eddard Stark, Warden of the North, my oldest friend," Robert said. "He will put the realm to rights while I hunt and drink myself to an early grave." Laughter rippled through the council chamber. Cersei's lips curved, but her eyes were cold. When the council adjourned, she lingered. Her gaze met Baelish's for a heartbeat, and the Master of Coin smiled that knowing smile. "Strange, isn't it, Your Grace?" he murmured. "How wolves and lions are always drawn together, though never kindly." "Kindness is for fools," she said, sweeping past him. "Let the wolf come. We shall see which beast endures." She found Jaime later in the courtyard, training with the white-cloaked knights. His blade flashed bright as sunlight, his movements swift and sure. When at last he saw her, he lowered his sword and came to her side. "The wolf's in the city," he said quietly. Cersei nodded. "The gods have a cruel humor." "He's an honest man," Jaime said. "He won't last long." "Then let us hasten his ruin," she whispered, and so began the slow, silent war between lion and wolf. One fought not upon fields of battle, but in whispers, glances, and the careful placing of blades unseen. Lord Eddard came to King's Landing like a man stepping into the lair of beasts. The city stank of heat and secrets. The gold cloaks bowed as he passed, though few met his eyes. He took his seat upon the small council, his northern furs heavy amidst the silks of the south, and began the task of untangling the realm's rot. He found debt where there should have been gold, whispers where there should have been loyalty, and a king who cared for neither. Robert spoke often of hunting, of tourneys, of wine, and of old memories, but never of ruling. "You can have the throne, Ned," he said more than once. "I only wanted the crown to take her from me. Her, Lyanna." Even now, years after her death, the ghost of the wolf maid haunted them both. And though Ned never said her name aloud before the queen, Cersei knew. She saw it in his eyes when he looked upon her husband. Pity mingled with sorrow. Pity was something she would never forgive. One night, she summoned him to her chambers. The air was heavy with the scent of myrrh and candle wax. She stood before him, cloaked in shadow, her golden hair loose about her shoulders. "You served my husband well in war," she said. "Tell me, my lord, will you serve him as well in peace?" "I serve the realm," Ned replied, "not one man's pleasure." Her smile was slow. "You are too honest for this city. It will devour you." "I have faced worse winters than this. Winter comes for us all," she said softly. For a moment, their eyes held, wolf and lion, memory and pride. Then she turned away, the faintest trace of amusement on her lips. "Be careful, Lord Stark. In King's Landing, even truth has claws." He left her chambers uneasy, though he could not have said why. Weeks passed. The court hummed with rumors of bastards in the city, of debts unpaid, of plots against the crown. Ned's honor drew him ever closer to the truth, and Cersei watched from afar. her patience thinning. At last, she went to her father. Lord Tywin received her in his solar at Casterly Rock, a raven's letter unopened beside him. His armor gleamed, though he no longer wore it to war. "You are restless," he said without looking up. "The wolf digs too deeply. He'll tear the crown apart before the realm is ready." Tywin's quill did not pause. "Then ensure he fails." She hesitated. "And if he does not?" He looked up then, his eyes like molten gold. "Then kill him, as one puts down a rabid beast." Cersei bowed her head. "As you command, father." When she rode back to King's Landing, the wind from the west followed her, cold and sharp. The lioness had her orders. In the capital, the game quickened. The king fell deeper into drink, the hand deeper into secrets, and the queen into wrath. The moment of choice approached unseen, like a dagger in the dark. It came, as such moments often do, not in council or war, but in silence, the quiet hour before dawn when Cersei stood upon her balcony and watched the sea. "Why did you come here, wolf?" she whispered. "Was it honor that brought you, or ghosts?" The wind offered no answer. Below, the city lay sleeping, its towers gleaming like pale teeth in the moonlight. She turned from the sea at last, her eyes hard as glass. "If honor is his sword," she said, "then pride shall be mine." And in that vow was born the tragedy yet to come, the echo of an old hatred, long dormant, now waking once more. For when the wolf's truth met the lion's pride, the realm itself would bleed, and the north and the west would again learn why their houses were never meant to share a crown. The days in King's Landing grew hotter as summer deepened, though no warmth touched the hearts of those who ruled within the Red Keep. The small council met each morning, and each morning brought more discord. The king's debts multiplied. His patience dwindled, whispers filled the court like flies over a carcass, and the walls seemed to listen. Lord Eddard Stark kept to his duties, though he found little comfort in them. He missed the clean air of the north, the smell of pine and snow. The heat of the capital choked him, and the stink of deceit was worse still. In the south, words were sharper than blades, and lies wore the faces of friends. He wrote often to Winterfell, letters heavy with restraint, for he did not wish to trouble his wife or children with the rot he had found. Yet each night, when the candles burned low, he would sit alone and think of Brandon, his laughter, his temper, his death, and of how all roads led back to that long ago day when wolves and lions first crossed paths. He did not know that Cersei Lannister thought of it too. The queen watched him from afar, her eyes as cold as the gold of her crown. She had come to see in him a reflection of everything she despised: duty, loyalty, restraint. Yet there was a strange fascination there as well. Brandon had been all fire. Eddard was all ice. Between the two of them, she thought, lay the story of her life, what she had lost, and what she would destroy. When word reached her that the Hand was prying into matters of bloodlines and bastards, her unease turned to anger. She summoned her brother to her chambers one night, the moon high over the bay. "He knows," she said. "The wolf digs too deep. He means to find the truth of our children." Jaime stood beside the window, arms crossed. "And if he does, then he will tell Robert. Then Robert will kill us." "No," she said, her voice low and fierce. "Robert will kill me. You he might forgive, but not me." He looked at her for a long moment. "Then what do you mean to do?" "Whatever I must." The next morning, she found Lord Stark in the gardens of the Red Keep, where the air smelled faintly of lemon and salt. He was standing by the fountain, his face grave as always. She approached him slowly, her steps measured. "You have been busy, Lord Hand," she said. "I do what duty demands." "Duty?" Her smile was thin. "That word will be your death. I have faced death before. Not like this." She stepped closer. "You play a game you do not understand. You think because you are honest, you are safe. But in King's Landing, honesty is a blade with no hilt. You will cut yourself before you cut your foe." He met her gaze steadily. "You speak of danger, then speak plainly." She did. "My children are mine and mine alone. If you value your life, say nothing of what you think you've found." Ned studied her, and for a heartbeat, he saw not the queen, but the girl she must once have been, proud, wounded, trapped in a gilded cage. Then he said, "When the king returns, I will tell him the truth." Her eyes turned to stone. "Then you had best make peace with your gods, Lord Stark." She left him there among the lemons and fountains, and though he did not move, he felt the weight of doom settle upon his shoulders. Days later, King Robert rode north to hunt boar, and when he returned, he was half dead, his belly torn open by the beast's tusks. The stench of blood filled the royal chamber, and the realm shuddered. On the morning the king died, Cersei took her place beside the Iron Throne, her son Joffrey standing tall beside her. The boy's eyes gleamed with pride and cruelty. The queen's voice rang clear as bells. "The king is dead," she declared. "Long live the king." Ned Stark entered the hall not long after, the parchment of Robert's final will clutched in his hand. He came not as conqueror, but as the last honest man in a kingdom of liars. When he read aloud the words naming him protector of the realm, Sir Jaime's hand found his sword, and the queen's smile sharpened. "The king's seal is not his voice," she said. "The boy is the true heir." "The boy," Ned said quietly, "is no Baratheon." The hall erupted. Steel hissed free, and the air filled with shouts. Cersei did not flinch. "Seize him," she commanded. And so the wolf was taken. They chained him in the dungeons beneath the Red Keep, the same cold stone that had once heard his brother's screams. History had come full circle, though none in the city seemed to see it. Cersei went to him once, days before his sentence was to be carried out. The torches burned low, casting her face in shadow. "You should have stayed in the north," she said. "The south devours men like you." Ned looked up at her, weary but unbroken. "I came for peace." "There is no peace," she said, "only victory. And yet you do not look victorious." Her eyes flashed, but she said nothing. For a moment, it seemed she might turn away. Then she whispered, "My father told me the Starks were stubborn. He never said they were fools." When she left, the sound of her heels faded slowly, like the beating of a heart. In the days that followed, chaos gripped the city. The boy king took the throne. Blood flowed through the streets. The name of Stark was cursed. Ravens flew north bearing tidings of treachery and war. At Casterly Rock, Lord Tywin received them in silence. He had not wanted it to come to this, not war, not again, yet he knew it was inevitable. The wheel of vengeance turned, and once more, lions and wolves were bound to its spokes. "Prepare the host," he said to his men. "The north will howl." And so it did. News of Ned Stark's death came with the autumn winds, cold and bitter. In Winterfell, the banners rose once more, and in the west, the Lannisters sharpened their claws. The prophecy born in pride and flame had come to life again, the old curse of wolf and lion. Their houses, once divided by blood and arrogance, were now bound by hatred, their fates entwined in ruin. The North remembered. the West avenged, and the realm, caught between, began to burn anew. From that day forth, the maesters would say that no Stark and no Lannister were ever meant to share the same sun. For when the wolf runs beside the lion, only the gods know whose shadow will fall longest across the land. War came again to Westeros, as it always had and always would. The banners of the north rose like a storm upon the wind, gray dire wolves running across fields of white and crimson. From Winterfell to the Neck, from the Barrowlands to the Dreadfort, the call went out. The king in the north, and young Robb Stark answered it. The boy who had once listened to tales of knights and heroes now rode at the head of an army, his father slain, his honor unavenged. The memory of Lord Eddard's calm voice guided him, but the fire that burned in his heart was not his father's. It was Brandon's, wild and fierce, the same fire that had long ago driven one wolf south into the lion's den. The realm trembled beneath the weight of blood once more. The Riverlands burned, the Westerlands marched, and the north came south, silent as winter. At Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister received the news with neither joy nor sorrow. He was too old now for the thrill of war, yet he knew it was the only coin left to pay for peace. His son Jaime led the vanguard, his golden armor gleaming beneath the sun, and for every northern lord who rose, a lion's claw reached out to strike him down. "You cannot fight the north with fear alone," Kevin warned him. "I can fight it with victory," Tywin said. But even victory came late. The war dragged through mud and river, over fields strewn with ash and broken lances. The names of places became curses: the Whispering Wood, the Twins, the Green Fork. Songs were made before the bodies cooled, and even the minstrels sang with dread in their hearts. In King's Landing, Queen Cersei ruled as regent beside her monstrous son. Joffrey's crown sat heavy on his brow, and his temper grew fouler by the day. She had given him all her cunning, but none of her restraint. The boy was her blood, her pride, her punishment. Each time she looked upon him, she saw the price of her triumph. Yet she ruled still, and ruled well, through fear, through gold, through the whispered promise of vengeance. None dared cross her openly, though behind closed doors, the court muttered of the queen's madness and the boy king's cruelty. Still, there were nights when she would wake before dawn, the sound of the sea calling faintly beyond the city's walls. In those hours, she was no queen, no lioness, only a woman haunted by what she had lost and what she had done. Sometimes she dreamt of the wolf again, not Eddard, but Brandon, standing at the edge of a cliff, his hair whipped by the wind, his eyes bright and wild. "Do you regret me?" he would ask in her dream, and she would answer, "I regret nothing." But when she woke, her hands trembled. Far to the north, Robb Stark fought and won and fought again. The young wolf had never known defeat, yet with each victory, the realm slipped further into ruin. His men called him the young wolf, his enemies the boy king, but he carried himself like neither. There was something older in him, something that belonged to all the Starks before him. A quiet fury, a cold certainty that duty was the only truth worth dying for. Catelyn Stark rode beside him at times, her face pale beneath the weight of grief and the burden of counsel. She feared what her son was becoming. She feared what vengeance demanded. One night, she said to him, "You cannot build a future upon the bones of the past." Robb answered, "Then let the past stay buried. I fight for the living." But the past does not sleep easily in the north, nor in the south. In the Westerlands, Lord Tywin's victories grew bitter. The north would not yield. the riverlords would not break, and though he held the gold of half the realm, he felt the weight of every coin like a stone about his neck. At times, he would sit alone in his solar, maps spread before him, and his thoughts would stray to that first meeting, years past, when Brandon Stark had come to his hall seeking alliance. If I had let it be, he sometimes thought. If I had swallowed my pride, joined wolf to lion. But such thoughts he never spoke. Pride had always been his true heir. The war reached its cruelest hour at the Twins, where betrayal met blood. The red wedding ended what steel could not. The young wolf was slain, his mother beside him, and the banners of the North fell in silence. When word reached King's Landing, Joffrey laughed until tears streamed down his face. Cersei watched her son and said nothing. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a hollow ache she could not name. "The wolves are dead," Joffrey crowed. "No," she said softly, "they are not." For even then, ravens carried word of the North stirring again, of wildlings beyond the wall, of shadows in the snow. The old saying came once more to her lips. Winter is coming. It had been her jest once, long ago, when a bold northern knight had stood before her father's hearth. Now it was no jest at all. Years later, when the realm had changed hands and kings like dice, the old maesters would write that House Stark had fallen to ruin and House Lannister to madness. But those who lived to tell the tales remembered more truly. They spoke of how the two great houses had been bound from the start, not by love, not by marriage, but by fate's cruel thread. A thread spun the day Brandon Stark rode to Casterly Rock and severed the peace before it ever began. They said the gods themselves had watched, silent and cold, as wolf and lion met, and in their meeting set the doom of generations. Cersei would live to see her house burn from within and her children's crowns melt to ashes. The North would rise once more, stronger than before, its snows washing away the sins of the South. But none of that was yet written. In that hour, as the war's fires dimmed and the rivers ran red, the lioness stood upon her balcony, her eyes on the western sea. Behind her, the city slept, the crown heavy upon her brow. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest howl from far away, a sound that did not belong to the South. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she could almost believe it was his voice, the wolf's voice, calling to her across the years, across the ruin. "You won, Cersei," it seemed to say. Was it worth the cost? She did not answer. The sea crashed below, and the wind took her silence for truth. For in the end, the tale of the Starks and the Lannisters was not one of victory or defeat, but of pride, the oldest curse of all. And so the bards would sing of it long after both houses had faded into history. When wolf met lion by the sea, pride was born, and peace did flee. Gold and snow shall never wed, till both their lines lie cold and dead. Winter had come at last. In the north, the snows lay deep across the wolfswood, and the breath of the direwolves hung like ghosts in the pale dawn. The castles of men had grown quiet, their fires burned lower, their gates stayed shut against the endless white. The wars of men seemed distant now, their crowns and banners buried beneath the weight of cold. Yet the North remembered, as it always did, and the scars of the past ran deep beneath the frost. At Winterfell, Sansa Stark walked the battlements alone. She had returned from the South with eyes too old for her years and a heart too heavy for songs. The ghosts of her kin walked beside her in every corridor. Her father's stern patience, her mother's gentle counsel, her brother's laughter, her sister's wild defiance, all gone, yet not gone. Winterfell had always been a place of memory, and now it was a shrine to the dead. When she closed her eyes, she could still see King's Landing, the red stones, the stench of smoke and blood, the cruel laughter that echoed through the halls of the Red Keep. She could still see Cersei Lannister, her beauty undimmed, her smile like a knife. Sansa had once thought the queen the very image of grace. Now she knew better. The lioness had been beautiful, yes, but beautiful as fire is beautiful when it devours the world. Far to the west in Casterly Rock, that same fire still burned. Cersei sat upon her balcony, the wind tearing at her hair, the sea crashing far below. The rock had never felt so vast nor so empty. Her father was dead, her sons gone, her throne taken by strangers. The lion's den was silent now, but for the gulls that wheeled above the cliffs and the whisper of the waves against the stone. She drank her wine and stared into the horizon, where the sun sank red as blood into the sea. The wolf was right, she thought. All things end. And in her mind she saw again that first meeting so many years past, the wild, stark prince, laughing before her father's throne, his eyes full of mischief and defiance. "Would you have me steal you?" he had asked. She had laughed then, proud and unafraid. "Would you not dare?" He had dared too much and died for it. And she had lived and lost everything. A sudden gust of wind swept through the balcony, scattering the candle's light. Somewhere in the halls below, a door slammed like the echo of a distant storm. Cersei closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, she thought she heard a wolf's howl carried faintly over the waves, a sound that had no place this far south. Perhaps it was only memory, or perhaps the gods, in their cruel humor, still watched. In the north, Jon Snow rode through falling snow toward the wall. He had seen the end of kings and the ruin of cities, the death of dragons and the breaking of oaths. The old world was dying, and he had no wish to see what new one would rise in its place. Yet even he could not escape the ghosts of the houses that had shaped him. He thought often of his father, or the man he had called father. Eddard Stark had raised him with honor, had given him his name, but never his truth. It had taken the end of the world for that truth to be spoken. He was no Stark by birth, but Targaryen by blood, fire and ice both. And still, when he dreamed, it was not dragons he saw, but dire wolves running across a field of snow. At the edge of the world, he built the pyres himself, setting torch to the frozen dead. The flames rose high and red against the dark sky. When at last the fires burned low, he looked out beyond the wall, where the cold winds howled unending. "Winter has passed," he said softly, "but winter always comes again." In that moment, the realm was still, not at peace, but at rest. The war of the wolves and the lions had burned itself to cinders, leaving only ash and tale. Yet some stories, once told, do not end. They echo through time, through blood, through the hearts of those who survive. In the ruins of King's Landing, where the stone still smelled faintly of smoke, a wandering bard sang of days long gone. His voice was low and rough, but his song carried far in the cold air. The lion roared, the wolf replied. Their pride was won, their peace denied. Through flame and snow their fate was sown, till both their thrones were overthrown. The small folk listened, though most did not understand the old song's meaning. To them, it was just another lament for dead kings. Yet among the listeners was a young girl with hair the color of dark autumn leaves and eyes as sharp as winter's edge. When the bard finished, she asked, "Did the wolf and lion ever make peace?" The old man smiled sadly. "Child, some beasts were never meant to share a den." "But what if they had?" she pressed. "Would the realm have known peace then?" He shook his head. perhaps for a time, but the gods are cruel. They made pride the birthright of both." She said no more, but when the bard left, she lingered by the river bank, watching the water carry the ashes of the city out to sea. In the ripples, she thought she saw the faint reflection of a dire wolf running beside a golden lion, their forms made of foam and light. Then the current took them both, and the water was only water once more. That night, far across the land, the winds changed. They blew from the west, salt and cold, sweeping through empty halls and broken keeps. They whispered through Casterly Rock, through the Red Keep, through the crypts of Winterfell. And if one listened closely, one might almost hear voices in the wind. Not words, but the memory of them. Would you not dare? I would. Then silence again. The kind of silence that follows the end of all things, not peace, but the pause before the telling of the tale anew. The masters who came after would write that the Starks and Lannisters never joined in marriage, nor ever could. One ruled by pride, the other by honor, and between them lay the chasm of their natures. Yet they had shaped the fate of kingdoms, their feud spanning generations until both houses were spent. And though the lion's gold would fade, and the wolf's howls grow faint, still the bards would sing, not of thrones or wars, but of the two who began it all, of a lioness who longed to be free, of a wolf who dared to defy a king, of love that might have changed the world had the world allowed it. And so the song would end as all songs do, with memory and with longing, and with the bitter wisdom of those who lived too long to forget. For in the end, it was not crowns or swords that doomed them, but the oldest truth of all, that pride is the coldest winter, and love the fire that cannot last. The snows melted slowly that spring, as though the world itself hesitated to wake. From the wall to the reach, the fields lay scarred by war and fire, yet green shoots pushed through the ash, stubborn as the hearts of men. The realm that had been broken was knitting itself together, though its seams still bled. No king sat the Iron Throne now. The dragons were gone, the lions had fallen silent, and the wolves ruled only the cold and the stones. The Meisters called this age the Quiet Reign, an age without crowns, when the small folk governed themselves as best they could, and the great houses looked inward, nursing their wounds. At Winterfell, Lady Sansa Stark, the last of her line, walked the halls her ancestors had built. Time had touched her gently, yet her eyes held the weight of many winters. The North was hers again, not by conquest, but by endurance. The banners that hung above the great hall were faded, their edges singed by old fires, yet they still bore the gray dire wolf of her house. Some nights she dreamed of the past, of her father's voice, her mother's smile, her brother's laughter, and the songs of the South that had once promised beauty. But when she woke, she found peace in the cold. The North asked for little and betrayed no one. Still, even peace has echoes. One morning, as the first light touched the snow, a rider came to Winterfell from the west. He bore no banners, only a sealed letter pressed in wax of deep crimson. The messenger was an old man, bent with age, and he bowed low before her. "From Casterly Rock, my lady," he said. The name was a ghost in her mind. "There are no Lannisters left," she said. "Not in name, perhaps," he answered, "but the rock endures." She broke the seal and read. The words were few, the hand elegant and strong despite its tremor. "To Lady Sansa Stark of Winterfell, I write to you as one who bears the weight of a name that once burned too bright. The house that was mine is dying, and I will not let it die in silence. Come to the rock. There are debts that must be paid, and truths that must be laid to rest. T. There was no sigil, no title, only that single letter. Yet she knew at once whose hand had written it. Tyrion Lannister, the last lion. She read the letter 3 times before she set it aside. The fire crackled in the hearth, and beyond the window, the snow fell soft and steady. She could have burned it then and been done. The North had no need of the West. But something in the words, not the plea, but the weariness behind it, stayed her hand. Within the week, she rode south. The journey took her through lands she barely recognized, villages rebuilt upon the ruins of war, fields sown anew where bones still lay beneath the soil. The rivers ran clearer now, though the people still spoke in hushed tones when they spoke of the old days. At last, she came to the western sea. Casterly rock rose from the cliffs like a mountain turned to gold. Its towers gleamed in the setting sun, proud and ancient still, though its gates stood open and unguarded. The sound of the sea filled the air, endless, patient, eternal. She was met not by knights nor servants, but by Tyrion himself. He had grown older, as all men must. His hair had turned white, his face lined by both laughter and regret. Yet his eyes, sharp and weary, were unchanged. "My lady of the North," he said, bowing slightly, "you are as beautiful as the snows that never melt." "And you," she replied, "are as impertinent as ever." He smiled faintly. Some things outlive even pride. He led her through the silent halls of the Rock. The tapestries had been taken down, the gold dimmed, but the sea's roar filled every corridor. "The lions are gone," he said. "Jaime, Cersei, father, all dust now. The Rock belongs to ghosts and echoes, and to you. Only until the end," he said quietly, "and that end is near." He brought her to a high balcony overlooking the waves. There, upon a marble table, lay a single sealed chest. Its lock was old, its hinges worn. "I called you here for this," Tyrion said. "These are the letters of my sister, written in her final days. I never sent them. Some were to me, some to you, some to no one at all. They should not be forgotten, but neither should they be read by those who would twist them into tales." He placed a small dagger upon the table beside the chest. "I ask only that you decide. Burn them or keep them. Let the truth live or let it die." Sansa said nothing. The wind from the sea tugged at her cloak. "She hated you," Tyrion said softly. "And yet, I think she envied you too. You survived. She never could." Sansa looked at the chest for a long while. She thought of all that had been lost, all that had been broken. The wolves, the lions, the thrones, the songs. Then she reached for the dagger. When the flame touched the parchment, it caught quickly. The fire burned gold and red, bright as the sunset over the sea. The wind carried the ashes away, scattering them across the waves. "Let them rest," she said. Tyrion bowed his head. So ends the song of lions and wolves. They stood together in silence as the last embers faded. The sea roared below, endless as time. Before she departed, he said, "Do you believe there might ever have been peace between our houses?" Sansa thought of Brandon and Cersei, of her father and the king, of all the blood spilled between pride and love. "No," she said at last, "but there might have been understanding." When she left, the sun was setting, and the Rock glowed red in the dying light. Tyrion watched her ride away until she was no more than a shadow upon the road. That night, he sat alone by the sea, the salt wind stinging his eyes. The Rock trembled beneath the waves, and he imagined he could hear voices whispering from the deep. The ghosts of lions and wolves, their quarrel long ended, their pride spent. In the north, the snows would fall again. In the west, the waves would beat forever against the cliffs, and somewhere between, the tale of their houses would live on, not in glory nor in shame, but in the quiet truth of what might have been. For though no marriage had ever joined Stark and Lannister, the fates of their blood had been bound from the first word spoken between wolf and lion. And even as the world moved on, their story remained a warning, a lament, a song whispered to the sea. When gold met gray and pride met frost, the realm was won, the realm was lost. Their hearts were wild, their thrones were stone, and neither beast could rule alone. So ended the age of wolves and lions, and the realm breathed again, though the wind still carried the faint echo of their names. The wind came from the sea that night, cold and salt sharp, carrying with it the scent of storms and endings. Upon the cliffs of Casterly Rock, the torches swayed in their brackets, their flames bending low before the gusts. In the high chamber overlooking the waves, Tyrion Lannister sat alone with a goblet of wine gone cold, and the sound of the tide echoing through the stone. The fires had long since burned out in the western halls. The rock was nearly empty now, its people scattered or dead, its gold locked away in vaults no one came to count. Yet the sea kept its vigil. It had been there before the first Lannister carved his name into the cliffs, and it would remain long after the last lion had fallen silent. Tyrion had not slept for days. Since Lady Sansa Stark's departure, the stillness of the castle had grown heavier, the weight of memory pressing upon him like armor too tight to bear. He poured the last of the wine and raised the cup. "To you, sister," he murmured, his voice roughened by the years. "You burned the world to keep your crown, and still the ashes slipped through your fingers." He drank, then laughed softly to himself. "To you too, wolf girl. You found the peace none of us could." The candle beside him sputtered, the flame shrinking to a trembling spark before it steadied again. Shadows danced along the walls, long, wavering shapes that might have been ghosts, or only the tricks of the light. He thought of Jaime, once bright and beautiful, who had died for love beneath the city that had damned them both. He thought of his father, who had believed legacy could outlast sin. And he thought, not for the first time, of Cersei, proud, terrible Cersei, whose name had become a curse even among those who once knelt to her. It was strange, he reflected, how much of the realm's sorrow had been born from a single meeting, decades past, a Stark's defiance, a Lannister's pride, and a love neither house would ever speak of without shame. The sea crashed below, and Tyrion's mind drifted back to his youth, to the days when Casterly Rock had shone with life and laughter, when his sister had ruled every heart that looked upon her. He remembered how she had once spoken of a northern lord who had come to treat with their father. "He rode like he feared no one," she had said. "Not even father. He looked at me as though he meant to take me from this place." And Tyrion, young and unwise, had answered, perhaps he should have. Now, so many lives later, he understood what he had meant. He rose and crossed to the balcony. The wind whipped his cloak about him, and the sea stretched black beneath the stars. The moon lay broken upon the water, and for an instant it seemed to him that the waves formed the shapes of a wolf and a lion, chasing one another through the dark, never touching, never resting. He closed his eyes and let the wind carry the thought away. Below, in the lower halls, a servant moved quietly through the shadows, lighting the last of the torches. No lord lived there now. The rock had become a tomb for names carved too deep in history to forget. Yet still, out of habit or reverence, The fires were lit each night, as though flame alone could keep memory alive. Tyrion descended slowly, his steps echoing on the stone. In the great hall, he paused before the lion throne, carved from the same rock as the mountain itself, worn smooth by generations of power. Dust lay thick upon its seat. He reached out and brushed it away. "The lion's roar fades," he said, "but the echo lingers." In the silence that followed, another sound rose faintly, a howl carried on the distant wind. It might have been a wolf's call, or only the cry of the sea, but it made him smile all the same. "So you still watch us, do you, Stark?" he whispered. "You won after all. The North endures, while we crumble into the sea." He turned from the throne and walked the length of the hall, his lamp casting circles of light that trembled and broke upon the golden mosaics. When he reached the far doors, he paused once more and looked back. The rock seemed to breathe in the dark, the last heartbeat of a dying beast. He thought then of his sister's final letter, the one she had written but never sent. He knew its words by heart, for he had read them often in the sleepless hours. "If the gods are cruel, they will make me live long enough to see the North rise again. And when it does, I shall not curse them, for in that hour I will know that pride was my sin and love my punishment." He carried that letter always, tucked in the pocket of his coat, the paper soft and yellowed with age. Sometimes he wondered if Sansa had guessed what was written there before she burned the rest. He left the hall behind and descended to the shore, where the cliffs met the sea. The tide was low, the rocks slick beneath his boots, and the sound of the waves filled his ears. Kneeling, he took from his belt the small lion's brooch that had once pinned his father's cloak. Its gold had dulled, the ruby eyes dimmed, yet it still caught the moonlight as he turned it in his hand. "For House Lannister," he said quietly, "and for every fool who ever thought pride could outlive truth." He cast the brooch into the sea. It vanished with a small splash, swallowed by the dark. When he looked up, the dawn was beginning to break, pale light spreading over the horizon, touching the cliffs with silver. He felt old, impossibly old, but lighter somehow. The tide came in, washing over his boots, and the cold water made him shiver. As he climbed back toward the keep, he thought of Winterfell, of the snows that never melted, and of the woman who ruled there now, the last wolf. She would endure, he knew. The North always did. By the time he reached his chamber, the sun was rising. He poured himself one last cup of wine, though he did not drink it. The goblet sat beside him as he watched the light fill the room. Outside, the gulls began to cry. The rock glowed gold once more, as it had in his youth. When the servants came later, they found him seated by the window, eyes closed, the faintest smile upon his lips. The sea wind had blown through the room, scattering the parchments from his desk. Among them lay a single line, written in his careful, slanted hand. "When wolf and lion meet again, may they remember the cost of pride and the mercy of forgiveness." So ended the last of the lions. In the years that followed, the bards sang of him rarely, for there were few left who cared for songs of old houses. Yet in the north, where the snows lay deep and the heart trees whispered beneath the stars, the tale of the Starks and the Lannisters endured. A story not of love nor hate, but of fate itself. And sometimes, when the wind blew from the west, the children of Winterfell swore they could hear it in the distance. The roar of a lion mingled with the long, mournful cry of a wolf, carried together upon the sea. Thus ended the tale of the wolf and the lion, bound by pride, undone by time, their crowns long lost, their hearts long gone, yet still they sing, forever one.